Welcome to our channel, where we explore the mysterious, the unexplained, and the supernatural. Join us for captivating stories that will send shivers down your spine and leave you questioning the unknown. Today, we're exploring a quiet but deeply unsettling UK haunting known as the Silent Bells of St. Mary's. Every night at exactly midnight, the bells of St. Mary's Church are said to ring, even though the bells themselves were removed over a century ago. There are no ropes, no mechanisms, and no official record of them ever ringing again. And yet for generations people living nearby have reported the same experience: low, distant bell tolls echoing through empty streets, always at the same time and always stopping abruptly. This is one of the UK's quietest and most unsettling hauntings, a story that survives not because it is dramatic, but because it refuses to go away. St. Mary's Church sits slightly apart from the village it once served, not abandoned but not truly active either. Built in the late medieval period, the church has seen centuries of use, neglect, restoration, and silence. Like many rural churches across England, it eventually outlived the community that once revolved around it. By the late 1800s, attendance had dropped sharply, the bell tower fell into disrepair, and the bells were removed entirely, recorded in parish documents as unsafe and beyond repair. After that, the church became something else, not quite abandoned, but not quite alive. Locals continued to pass it, and gravediggers still worked the surrounding grounds, but the building itself entered a strange in-between state, preserved yet dormant. It was during this period that the reports began. The earliest known accounts come from the early 1900s, when villagers living within earshot of the church began mentioning a faint ringing sound late at night. At first, it was dismissed as imagination, blamed on the wind, distant farms, or bells carried from other towns. However, the details never changed. The sound was always described as slow and deliberate, never hurried and never continuous, always beginning shortly after midnight. People also noticed something else. The sound did not behave like normal bells. It did not travel or echo outward, and it felt local, as if it existed only in the space immediately around the church. One resident later described it as the idea of bells, rather than bells themselves. As the years passed, the pattern became harder to ignore. Families across different decades reported waking at the same time, often without knowing why, just moments before the sound began. Others claimed animals reacted first, with dogs whining, and horses refusing to move near the church grounds after dark. One account recorded in a local historical journal described a man returning late from work, who stopped walking because he believed a funeral procession was passing, only to find no lights, no movement, and no procession at all, just the sound of bells ringing from a tower that no longer contained them. By the middle of the 20th century, the story had become something people spoke about quietly, not as a ghost story, but as a simple fact of living nearby. What unsettled people most was not just the sound itself, but how the area felt when it happened. Visitors described sudden drops in temperature near the tower, a feeling of pressure in the chest, and the sensation of being watched without being followed. Importantly, no one ever reported seeing an apparition. There were no figures in white, no faces at windows, and no visual manifestations at all, only a sense of presence, and the sound. A groundskeeper working in the 1970s later claimed the bells rang while he stood directly beneath the tower, and he said it felt less like hearing something and more like remembering it. Over time, explanations were offered. Some suggested underground air currents, while others pointed to distant bells carried by unusual atmospheric conditions. However, the explanations never fully aligned with the details. Nearby churches rang at different times, wind direction did not match the reports, and recordings taken in later years failed to capture anything, even though witnesses standing beside recording devices insisted they could hear the sound clearly. Engineers inspected the tower multiple times and found no mechanical sources, and parish officials eventually dismissed the claims as folklore, although they never outright denied them. One former vicar is said to have remarked that just because something cannot be heard by everyone does not mean it is not happening. This is where it becomes important to slow down. Stories like this live in the space between experience and explanation. There are no photographs, no recordings, and no physical evidence of bells ringing, so what we are left with is interpretation. One possibility is collective expectation. When a story becomes embedded in a community, people may unconsciously anticipate it, waking at the same time and interpreting familiar sounds in familiar ways. Another explanation involves infrasound, low-frequency vibrations that humans cannot consciously hear but can feel, which in certain environments can cause anxiety, unease, and even the sensation of sound where none exists. There is also the idea of memory echo, where places strongly associated with repeated events can trigger sensory recall. A church that rang bells daily for centuries may still be heard by those who know its history. And yet, none of these explanations fully account for the consistency of the reports, which span generations and individuals, many of whom had no prior knowledge of the legend at all. What makes the haunting of St. Mary's unsettling is not spectacle. There is no ghost demanding attention and no dramatic climax. The bells ring, and then they stop. The church remains, the tower stands empty, and the question is left unanswered. Before calling this paranormal, it is worth asking what evidence would actually confirm it. Is this folklore reinforced by expectation, a natural phenomenon we do not yet fully understand, or something tied to place, memory, and repetition? What explanation convinces you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy grounded explorations of hauntings, folklore, and the unexplained, like, subscribe, and join our channel for the next story.